We started last week looking at the life of Joseph. And boy, where we left him, you would think this guy's got a really bright future ahead of him. He's been given this coat of heirship designating that he is going to be the main heir of all of what his father has. His father loves him more than all the other 11 sons, and there are daughters as well. And he's the favorite. He's the favorite. He's the chosen one. And he has this dream where, he knows this dream is from God. And in this dream, his brothers, and a second dream establishes that not only his brothers, but also his parents, they're all bowing down to him. And it looks like he's got a very important and wonderful future ahead of him. But the next chapter in his life does not look quite so promising. And that's where we're going to pick up in Genesis chapter 37. When you look at the events that we're going to get into tonight, and all the things that here he has this wonderful, promising life, and man, in a day, it all is turned upside down. It goes from this promising future to what looks to be just a horrible future. Most people would just be disheartened. Most people put in Joseph's circumstance and what's about to happen, what we're going to be looking at, they would be so bitter, they would be so despondent, they probably just wouldn't be able to recover from it. Because not only is everything go really bad, he's going to end up being sold into slavery, but he's betrayed by his own brothers, his own family. That had to just hurt so much that he's done nothing wrong. He has been nothing but kind to them, and they treat him terribly and betray him. And that's what we find happening when we join them in chapter 37, verse 12. And his brethren went to feed their father's flock in Shechem. Now, I'm going to show you some of these locations here on this map, so you have a bit of an idea of distances that are traveled and kind of what's involved in Joseph's journeyings here. So, at the point that we join them, there's somewhere in this area. This whole area here is the land of Canaan. And it says that they're dwelling in the land of Canaan. They have recently come from a town called Mamre, which was right around here. Shechem is right here on the map. So they're somewhere in this area, and they go to the area of Shechem, the brothers do, to take care of the father's sheep. But he's obviously not right there because he sends Joseph to go see them. And Israel said unto Joseph, verse 13, Do not thy brethren feed thy flock in Shechem? Come, and I will send thee unto them. And he said to him, Here am I. Whatever you want me to do, I'll do it. I'm only too happy to help out. Verse 14. And he said to him, Go, I pray thee, see whether it be well with thy brethren, and well with the flocks, and bring me word again. Go see how they're doing. They've been gone for a while. They're out there somewhere with the sheep, and make sure that everything's okay, that they're okay, that the sheep are okay, and then, let me know what's going on. So he sent him out of the vale of Hebron, and he came to Shechem. And a certain man found him, and behold, he was wandering in the field. And the man asked him, saying, What seekest thou? And he said, I seek my brethren. Tell me, I pray thee, where they feed their flock. So he knows that they're somewhere in the area of Shechem, but it's not like he knows exactly where they are. It's like if I tell you, okay, Grace is somewhere in Skaneateles doing something, that doesn't mean you can just go right to where she's at. And here's, Joseph asking people, have you seen some guys feeding some sheep? I'm looking for my brothers. Verse 17. And the man said, They are departed hence, for I heard them say, Let us go to Dothan. And Joseph went after his brethren and found them in Dothan. So, of course, shepherds, they're nomads. They keep moving with the flock, and that was the culture. It wasn't like here you couldn't just take sheep and just kind of wander across the west like maybe they did at one time. You have your own land. But there, all the land was available for the sheep to go and graze on. So they keep moving, and they've moved from Shechem up to here, Dothan. That's probably a journey of about 15 miles, a little less than 15 miles. Verse 18. And when they saw him afar off, before he ever gets near to them, when they see him coming, his brothers, even before he came near unto them, they conspired against him to do what?
Slay him.
To slay him. They decide they're going to kill their brother. I mean, wow. And when you read about, in the New Testament, it talks about that his brothers were moved with envy against him. That's why they decide that they want to kill him. Because they are so envious of what he's getting. They're envious of him being the chief heir. They're envious of him having the father's favor. And this envy just so grows in them that they conspire to kill him. Sometimes it's hard to remember that this is the believer's line. These are Jacob's sons. This is, the best hope for mankind, because that Savior has to come through, the Christ has to come through this line. And look at where these guys are at, including, Judah, the one who is the direct descendant, the direct ancestor of Jesus Christ. But they become so envious of him that they want him dead. Verse 19. And they said one to another, Behold, this dreamer cometh. And that wasn't, dreamer like, he's always got his head in the clouds. This is the guy, this is in direct reference to, they're still mad about that dream. They're still like, who does this guy think he is? Here he is, our kid brother, and he thinks that somehow he's going to have everybody bowing down to him, literally. Verse 20. Come now, therefore, and let us slay him and cast him into some pit, and we will say, Some evil beast hath devoured him, and we shall see what will become of his dreams. That'll be the end of all of his dreams. We'll just kill him. We'll kill him, we'll throw him into some pit and just say, Dad, sorry, a beast got him. Some lion, some bear, something got a hold of him. A wolf. And Reuben heard it, verse 21, and he delivered him out of their hands and said, Let us not kill him. Reuben is the oldest one, and it's interesting because, he's the one that if it wasn't, in normal circumstances, he would have been the one that would have been designated the heir. And yet he's the one that keeps them from killing him. Let us not kill him. Verse 22. And Reuben said unto them, Shed no blood, but cast him into this pit that is in the wilderness, and lay no hand upon him, that he might rid him out of their hands to deliver him to his father again. He said, well, let's not kill him. We'll just toss him in this pit, And he does this not thinking that we'll just throw him in the pit and that'll be it, but his plan is that he'll come back when they're not around and save them. So Reuben's not that bad. Verse 23. And it came to pass, when Joseph was come unto his brethren, that they stripped Joseph out of his coat of many colors, that coat of heirship that was on him. And they took him and cast him into a pit, and the pit was empty, there was no water in it. They would have these wells in the east. Typically, these wells would be much smaller on the top than at the bottom. There'd be big enough on the bottom that it might be like the size of a good-sized room, whereas the top would just be kind of big enough for a person to actually fit in there. And they generally were very deep. Verse 25. And they sat down to eat bread, and they're real shook. And they lifted up their eyes and looked, and behold, a company of Ishmaelites came from Gilead with their camels bearing spicery and balm and myrrh, going to carry it down to Egypt. So these are some, merchants, some guys that are going to trade, and they're coming from the area of Gilead, this whole region on the other side of the river here. You've got this river connecting the Sea of Chinnereth and the Dead Sea or Salt Sea. And Gilead is this region, so they're somewhere from here. And they're merchants, and they are heading that way. So they have this plan. And they sat down, they eat, and they saw these guys coming. And Judah said unto his brethren, verse 26, what profit is it if we slay our brother and conceal his blood? That doesn't help us. We don't get any farther ahead that way. Come and let us sell him to the Ishmaelites, and let not our hand be upon him, for he is our brother and our flesh. And his brethren were content. So he comes up with this plan that instead of killing him, which, now they've got his blood on their hand, they'll just sell him to these guys who are traders with a D as opposed to them with a T. Verse 28 rather. Then there passed by Midianites, merchantmen, that's the guys from Gilead, and they drew and lifted up Joseph out of the pit, and sold Joseph to the Ishmaelites for 20 pieces of silver, and they brought Joseph into Egypt. Now, a lot of times people read this and they never think about that Joseph is being taken from this area all the way off of this map. He's going to Egypt, not even on that map. Egypt, you can see they're going from this area all the way down to here. That's probably a distance of somewhere around 250 miles. This is the same distance, and this is the thing to think about. This is the same distance that the Israelites, hundreds of years later, are going to travel in reverse. He's going from there down to Egypt. When they're led out of Egypt, they're going right back to that same land. This is the promised land he's going to. Too bad that they didn't follow his route or have him as a travel guide, because this route that he goes and his brethren, as you get into the record further, they're going to make this journey 2-3 times the same distance, and it takes 40 years for the Israelites to get there when they come out of Egypt. And it's not that they had an even worse sense of direction than me. And Moses, it wasn't that he was so bad. They wander around the wilderness because of their fear, and that's a whole other thing. But they're afraid to go into the promised land. They're afraid. They're afraid to go in. But it is interesting to see that in reality, that's probably just about a little over a month's journey, that they could have done it in. And that Joseph does it, and that his brethren will. Verse 29. And Reuben returned unto the pit. So he obviously went somewhere. It doesn't talk about Reuben having left, but he obviously wasn't there at the time that they sold him, because he comes back thinking that now he can let Joseph out. And he returned to the pit, and behold, Joseph was not in the pit, and he rent his clothes. To rent your clothes doesn't mean, like you go and get a tuxedo. It means to tear the mantle. And that was done as a sign of great despair, anguish, being angry. So when things went really wrong, they ripped their mantle. That was a sign of just, being upset. Verse 30. And he returned unto his brethren and said, the child is not, and whither shall I go? He's not there. What happened? Where am I going to find him? Verse 31. And they took Joseph's coat and killed a kid of the goats and dipped the coat in the blood. And they sent the coat of many colors, that heirship, and they brought it to their father and said, this have we found. Know not whether it be thy son's coat or no. Hey, we found this coat. It looks like Joseph's. What do you think, Dad? Does that look like Joseph's coat to you? I think they're being clever. Verse 33. And he knew it was. Jacob did, and said, it is my son's coat. An evil beast hath devoured him. Joseph is without doubt rent in pieces. So what a thing to do to their father, huh? It's bad enough what they're doing, what they did to Joseph. But they know how much their father loves Joseph. And they set this up and, all like, let him figure it out himself. And he thinks that some terrible thing has happened to his son, that he has been attacked by a wild beast. And Jacob rent his clothes and put sackcloth upon his loins and mourned for his son many days. Sackcloth was like a real rough kind of garment, sort of like a burlap. And again, this was all done just when people were really upset. And all his sons, verse 35, and all his daughters rose up to comfort him, but he refused to be comforted and said, for I will go down into the grave unto my son mourning. Then his father wept for him. Jacob is so distraught. He's so heartbroken. He's grieving so badly. He says, I'll mourn for him for the rest of my life. I will go to my grave mourning for my son. Verse 36. And the Midianites sold him, Joseph, into Egypt unto Potiphar, an officer of Pharaoh and captain of the guard. What would you do if you were Joseph and all this had happened to you? How would you feel? There's a question to ask yourself. How would you feel? Would you still think that God was working for you? Would you still be trusting God? Would you still think that somehow God was going to bring to pass all these great things that he showed you? Whatever you do in that moment, whatever place you go to in your mind, that's going to determine what ends up. And certainly Joseph, if anybody had a good reason to just feel like, God's out of business and I've been betrayed and life is unfair, life sucks, and, so on, it would have been Joseph. But he doesn't. He doesn't. Amazingly, incredibly, this again, 17-year-old kid, 17-year-old kid continues to trust God. And because he does, in spite of all this bad stuff that's happened, when we next see Joseph, we skip chapter 38. That's that whole story we were talking about after fellowship. But we go to chapter 39, and we find out just what has become of Joseph once he's in Egypt. And Joseph, chapter 39, verse 1, was brought down to Egypt, and Potiphar, an officer of Pharaoh, captain of the guard, an Egyptian, bought him of the hands of the Ishmaelites, which had brought him down thither. And the Lord had forsaken Joseph. No. The Lord was with Joseph. The Lord was with Joseph. And he, Joseph, was a prosperous man. Yeah, you think, sold in slavery, you kind of picture, there he is, being whipped and beaten and doing all this hard labor and all, life is just terrible and, it's like in Spartacus or what, that kind of thing. But it says Joseph was a prosperous man. Joseph was a prosperous man. Now, Joseph ends up in a position of great responsibility here. Because it says, and he was in the house of his master the Egyptian, and his master saw that the Lord was with him, and that the Lord made all that he did to prosper in his hand. And Joseph found grace in his sight, and he served him, and made him overseer over his house, and all that he had put into his hand. That was the most important position in this household. And when you think about this household, this is not like, this is bigger than Downton Abbey, okay? This is in a whole huge estate that Joseph would have been responsible for. And he has the overseer. The overseer was the steward of the house. It's difficult. We have nothing that I can think of in modern time, in our culture at any rate, that is a good comparison to what that responsibility was. Perhaps in the antebellum era, somebody that was the overseer of the plantation may have had a similar type of responsibility. But Joseph would have been that guy that he was in charge of everything. He conducted all the business of the estate. Nothing got done without his literal stamp of approval with the signet ring. That's what they would give him. He could buy, he could sell. Masters didn't even keep track of what they did. They just so trusted them that it was only once in a while, if they were suspicious, then they'd do an audit, kind of. That's where you find that one parable where he says, I've heard that you've done a bad job, his steward. You might lose your job. Let me go over the books. But here he is, and he's completely trusted. And he's prosperous. He's prosperous. So, yes, he's been sold into slavery, but what his day-by-day living is one of being a trusted, prosperous guy.
Wow.
Where did I leave off? 5. And it came to pass from the time that he made him overseer in his house and over all that he had, that the Lord blessed the Egyptian's house for Joseph's sake. Because the Lord blessed that whole household because of Joseph, so that Joseph could be even more prosperous. And that's how it is with God's people. God, when you are trusting God like Joseph did, you work someplace, that place is blessed because you're there. And God will prosper them on your account. It's so many times people sell short how big the new birth is and how much God's grace is on our lives. And when I say grace, I mean His favor is on our lives. How much God will do for not only us, but all those around us just to take care of you. And that was the case here with Joseph. God blessed that whole house of this Egyptian. This guy he's the captain of the guard. That would have been like, the army of Pharaoh, and he would have been like the captain of those that were kind of like the ones guarding Pharaoh himself. A very important position in the army. And the blessing of the Lord was upon all that he had in the house and in the field. Verse 6. And he left all that he had in Joseph's hand, and he knew not aught he had save the bread which he did eat. That's what I was telling you. He just so trusted Joseph, he didn't give it a second thought. The only thing he thought about was, what am I eating for dinner today? He didn't want to be bothered with any of the other, daily affairs. He could see that they were prospering. He knew that things were great, and he just trusted Joseph.
Wow.
And Joseph was a goodly person and well favored. So, everything's going good for Joseph again, right? God's blessed him, and now everything's going great. And you think, man, this is good. This is good. But things are going to change again. Verse 7. And it came to pass after these things that his master's wife cast her eyes upon Joseph, and she said, lie with me. Now, this isn't like, hey, Joseph, come here, just lay down, let's just, It may have been Joseph's brother that was named Benjamin, but, it's this woman's, definitely a Mrs. Robinson, if anybody gets that reference. She's trying to seduce him, absolutely. And she's like, Joseph, come here, come lie with me. Verse 8. But he refused and said unto his master's wife, behold, my master knoweth not what is with me in the house, and he hath committed all that he hath to my hand. There is none greater in his house than I. Neither hath he kept back anything from me but thee, because thou art his wife. How can I do this then, this great wickedness, and sin against God? This is wrong. I can't do this. I've been trusted. He's trusted me with everything. And he's given me everything but you. And you might want to give me you, but I'm not doing that. That's just wrong. Verse 10. And it came to pass as she spake to Joseph day by day, that he hearkened not unto her, to lie by her or be with her. She's relentless. This goes on day after day after day. She's trying to just seduce him. And you can bet, she's got, the lights down low. She's got the candles lit, some Barry White on the music. And, she's wearing something provocative. And she's full court press here trying to seduce him every day. Every day. And yet Joseph resists. Verse 11. And it came to pass about this time that Joseph went into the house to do his business. Now, that phrase, we kind of use the same phrase for the same euphemism as it's used there, okay? He goes into the house to do his business, and you'll see, because of what happens, it's pretty clear. And there was none of the men of the house there within. And she caught him by his garment as he's doing that, saying, lie with me. Now she's getting really aggressive, and she grabs him, there he is and half naked, and she grabs him by the garment and says, take me now. And he left his garment in her hand and fled and got him out. He just hightails it. He runs out. He's like, I am not going to let her force herself on me. I am not going to let this happen. I don't care what. I'm getting out of here. And he runs out of the house naked with her holding his clothes. And it came to pass that when he had left his garment in her hand and was fled forth, that she called unto the men of her house and spake unto them, saying, see, he hath brought in a Hebrew unto us to mock us. He came in unto me to lie with me. And I cried with a loud voice. And it came to pass when he heard that I lifted up my voice and cried, that he left his garment and fled and got him out. She's accusing Joseph of trying to rape her. When this happens, she's mad now. And she accuses Joseph of having tried to force himself on her. And she laid up her garment by her until his Lord came home. And she spake unto him according to these words, saying, the Hebrew servant which thou hast brought unto us came unto me to mock me. And, and that doesn't mean like he was making fun, like, hey, nice hair. Mock meant that, he came to take advantage of her. And it came to pass, as I lifted up my voice and cried, that he left his garment with me and fled out. And it came to pass, when the master heard the words of his wife, which he spake unto him, saying, after this manner did thy servant to me, that his wrath was kindled. And Joseph's master took him and put him unto the prison, a place where the king prisoners were bound, and he was there in prison. There, Joseph thrown into prison. Again, looking like everything's gone wrong. But You'll see next time that God is still with him.